The winter meetings come and go, and the Atlanta Braves remain silent so far this offseason in terms of additions, but there's still plenty left out there. We'll talk about what is left and look at the Rule 5 draft picks that the Braves made. All that on today's episode of Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani, and you can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. If you're watching us on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button as well. Leave me a comment down below. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. And it does help out the show tremendously whenever you do those things. If you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode, we'll recap everything that happened at the winter meetings. Not a lot happening for the Atlanta Braves. We'll discuss that too, although they did make some Rule 5 picks, which hasn't been done in a long time. We'll discuss those two players and what's left out there after the winter meetings. We'll get into all that on today's episode. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, the winter meetings, they have officially ended with the Rule 5 draft happening on Wednesday. There still were some major moves, which we'll talk about in a minute, including the one trade target that I wanted the most in Garrett Crochet. I knew it was never really going to be a possibility with what the White Sox wanted, but Garrett Crochet does get moved to the Red Sox. And again, we'll touch on that in a moment. But I want to start out talking about just the silence from the Atlanta Braves in terms of impact moves. This has been an unusual offseason for the Atlanta Braves. Now, Alex doesn't typically make moves at the winter meetings. There's nothing unusual about that. In fact, the way that Alex typically works during the offseason is that he gets right to work, and there's free agent signings to be done. It seems like he either does them immediately or he waits till the very end to see what's left. And there's usually nothing in the middle. There's usually nothing around the winter meetings, nothing in the December months for the Atlanta Braves, it feels like. And that's generally been the way that Alex has worked. And look, he did get to work quickly this offseason, shedding salary, and that's all he's done to this point. He made a couple of depth moves for some pitchers and Nick Allen and on the infield, but there hasn't been anything significant done to this roster at all this offseason. And it's just really unusual because, again, we're used to Alex, 2 weeks after the season ends, he's already signed a couple of free agents. And that just hasn't been the case this offseason. And so it's very unusual. It has us Braves fans sitting here getting impatient, which I understand because I am a fan. I say that all the time. I don't consider myself a part of the media. I consider myself a fan. And I feel it as well. There is certainly a drag on this offseason from a Braves standpoint when you're seeing all these other teams spend a lot of money. Now, that being said, I still think Alex Anthopoulos is one of the best GMs in all of baseball, if not the best. Now, there's a lot of disagreement about that on social media right now, and a lot of you aren't going to like me saying that because many of you at this point think Alex Anthopoulos is the worst. I do not agree with that. I think Alex Anthopoulos is one of the best GMs in baseball, and I certainly trust him. And as I said from the very beginning of this offseason and also last offseason, I said the same thing. The pieces are already in place for this team to compete and win a World Series. Let me say that again. The pieces are already in place for this team to win a World Series. I believe that. Maybe you don't, but I do. It's based on a lot of ifs, but that's the same for every baseball team. If Austin Riley stays healthy and is Austin Riley, if Matt Olson can get back to being 30, 40 home run guy, which, by the way, he hit 29 last year. He wasn't far off. If Ronald can come back healthy and be even, just the average Ronald Acuna year, if Ozzie Albies can get on track, if Michael Harris can take that next step, if Sean Murphy can get back to his first half 2023, and all those things are possible. Those aren't unrealistic expectations for those guys to just get back to being who they are and staying healthy. That is not unrealistic. And if that happens, this is one of the best lineups in all of baseball again. I believe that. I don't feel like Austin Riley just all of a sudden fell off a cliff. And in fact, you look at his numbers from June on last year before he got hurt, he was Austin Riley. Matt Olson had a down year. He still hit 29 home runs and almost drove in 100. Michael Harris is a guy that I want to see stay healthy because I think he has a lot of tools. Ronald is a big question mark, certainly. But I don't think it's unrealistic to expect these guys, and I didn't even mention Marcell Ozuna, who's been the best hitter consistently for the Braves over the last 2 years. I do not think it's unreasonable for this offense to get back to being one of the best offenses in baseball again. That's not unreasonable. That's not a big ask. Just be who they have been for the majority of their career and stay healthy. And on the pitching side, look, on paper, Sale, Lopez, Schwellenbach, Strider is one of the best rotations in baseball. I saw a clip from a Yankees fan talking about that with the addition of Max Fried and Garrett Cole, the Yankees might now have the best rotation in history. That is ridiculous. I don't even know if they have a top 5 rotation in baseball right now. But I'd take those 4 that the Braves have up against anybody in baseball. Now, I think some people are feeling uneasy about the starting rotation because there's not much behind those 4 that you really trust, and injuries are a big factor in pitching. They're a big factor for everybody, for every team, for every pitcher. But you're like me and you play the law of averages. The Braves were extremely healthy for the most part, other than Strider in the rotation last year. They got a lot of innings from Lopez, Schwellenbach, and Sale. And I think many of you are thinking there's no way they can duplicate that. And that's fair. Just like there was no way the Braves could duplicate the offense that they had in 2023. So it's fair. And that's why, for me, starting pitching is the biggest need and priority for this team. I go through all that to say, I believe this roster is in place to compete and win a World Series, as is. And if you don't believe me, go look at all the odds makers out there that have the Braves as one of the favorites to win the World Series. Look at our friends at FanDuel. They still have the Braves with the second best chance to win a World Series next year, tied with the Yankees. And that's after all the moves that were made at the deadlines. The Juan Soto deal to the Mets, Max Fried deal to the Yankees, and they still have the Braves with the second best odds. And back at the beginning of the offseason, Mike Petrello, he wrote an article looking at the top lineups based on projected F4 for next year, and the Braves were second behind the Dodgers. I mean, pretty much every projection, odds maker you look at for next year has the Braves with second or third best odds to win the World Series next year. Now, this game's not played on paper. I get that. I'm just telling you, based on who is already on the roster, there are many people, not just myself, who think that this team is good enough as is to compete and win a World Series. However, that is not to say that I don't think the Braves should do nothing. I'm just trying to help those who are ready to already. I've already seen the comments. I'm not going to watch 2025. This team is terrible. I've seen the comments. And look, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I'm just here to tell you my opinion too. That's why I do this podcast, and that's why you listen. I think this lineup is good enough. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be making any moves. It's just any moves that they make would increase their chances, increase their odds, and build depth, which needs to happen. And I think it will. We just have to be patient. It's been, like I said, it's been an odd offseason with the way things have gone, with Alex basically shedding money, but not spending any yet. And again, it feels like he didn't make the free agent signings early in the offseason like we're used to seeing. So at this point, it almost just feels like he's waiting on the discounts at the end of the offseason or for some trades to happen. And trades generally take longer. I'm sure there were a lot of conversations that A had at the winter meetings that might lead to something later, but trades generally take a longer time to develop. Sometimes they can get together quickly, like at the winter meetings, because you're right there and you can kind of hash it out, which sounds like it was the case with the Crochet deal. The Red Sox were eager after they missed out on Max Fried and Juan Soto, and they were eager to make a move, and so they went all in on Garrett Crochet. So those types of things can happen rather quickly. And AA is not somebody that is reactionary. While we as fans sit here and say the Mets just got Juan Soto, the Dodgers are doing all this, the Phillies got Jordan Romano, we got to do something. That's not how Alex operates, and that's not how any good GM should operate. And Alex is beyond our level of patience because he will sit back and he will generally make the right move. I mean, look at the Chris Sale move last year that happened later in the offseason. Nobody was even thinking about that. It goes out to be a move that eventually produces the Cy Young winner for last year. So again, I know Alex isn't perfect. He certainly has had some misses, but he's given me more reason than not to trust him. And again, while I think this roster is good enough as is to compete for a World Series, I do acknowledge that moves need to be made in the starting rotation in particular in my mind, and they have to get an outfielder. There's at least two significant moves that have to be made this offseason, and there's still plenty of time to get that done. And there's still plenty of options out there. And that's what I want to talk about next. There's a lot of deals that happen at the winter meetings, but there's still a lot of options out there. And we'll get into what's left here next. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. As I alluded to earlier, you look at the World Series odds for next year, and the Dodgers are at plus 370, and then the Braves and Yankees at plus 800, and the Mets got a big jump with the Juan Soto signing up to plus 900. They have odds out there for the awards next year as well, and Ronald has the 6th highest odds to win the MVP next year. They don't have the Cy Young out there yet. I was interested to see what they would have for Chris Sale and possibly Spencer Strider, although he's going to miss some time. But you can check all of that out at FanDuel.com. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Never waste a hunch and make everyone want more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. We're solely getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball, all the moves and signings that are happening this offseason. A lot to cover from the winter meetings, which we'll get into more of that, including that Crochet deal. But I want to talk about what's left out there because a lot of moves happen. A lot of us are getting impatient, anxious because we want to see the Braves make a move, and I get that. But there's still a lot of options for the Braves to go after. Now, a lot of these options, I don't necessarily think the Braves are going to get, but there are a lot of options out there. So I'm going to run down the list really quickly. Teoscar Hernandez, again, I like him. I don't know what he's looking for. I'm sure he's trying to get a multi-year deal, 2-3 year deal. Don't know if the Braves are willing to give him that at 22, 23 million, something like that. But he obviously, is a power hitter. The Braves like that. I still don't understand why they didn't go after him last offseason, but Teoscar Hernandez is available. Anthony Santander is available. Not necessarily somebody that I love for the outfield, but as we've talked about before, maybe somebody that you live with him in the outfield for 2020, 2025, and then he moves into that DH role. Also somebody that can back up first base. He's available. Jerickson Profar, not somebody that I'm highly interested in, but he can play the outfield. He is available. He's coming off a big season that I don't buy necessarily. So I think he's going to get overpaid, but he is available. Jock Peterson is available. He's not an outfielder, though, unfortunately. He's a DH. We already got one of those. Max Kepler, Randall Grichuk, if you're looking for some, Kepler and a lefty platoon guy, Grichuk and a righty platoon guy. Those guys are out there if you want to try to piece things together, possibly on the cheap, and hope that Acuna comes back ready to go. Those guys are out there. And then you got some trade options as well. The Kyle Tucker trade idea, I know a lot of you have pitched it to me in the past, and I didn't really think the Astros would want to trade him because, the Astros want to compete, but now it's sounding more and more likely that he will get moved. And if that is the case, I think you got to be in on that. Again, you never know what the other team is wanting. And it sounds like the Cubs are heavily involved in Kyle Tucker because they can offer them an Isak Paredes and a Seiya Suzuki to give them a couple of MLB guys now to help the Astros compete and some guys that have some control. So Cubs kind of match up in that way. And the Cubs, I assume, would only do that deal if they could extend Kyle Tucker, because otherwise it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if Kyle Tucker is available, I mean, he's one of the best players in the game, a 30-30 threat. If he's available, again, I know it's 1 year of control, but that would be a huge difference maker. That might be the biggest difference maker on this list other than Roki Sasaki, but that would be a huge difference maker if the Braves could go out and get somebody like him. Cody Bellinger, I've said before, I don't really love the idea of a Cody Bellinger unless the Cubs are going to eat some of that contract, and then what are you giving up for them to eat that contract? But Cody Bellinger, could be available as the Cubs say they want to hold on to Suzuki, but then there's also rumors that he might be in part of a trade to the Astros in a Kyle Tucker type of deal. But either one of those guys, I obviously would prefer Suzuki, but again, there's some options there. You look at the pitching market, Corbin Burns is out there. Braves aren't going to sign him, I don't think. But after what Max Fried got, Corbin Burns is probably about to surpass him with what he gets in free agency. Jack Flaherty is out there. I'm a believer in what Jack Flaherty did last year. The underlying metrics, everything seemed to support the bounce back year that Jack Flaherty had. I think that's probably going to range him again, probably out of what the Braves want to do. Pavetta's a guy that I liked early on in the process. I don't love the fact that there's a qualifying offer attached to him. The Reds have shown interest in him, but again, it's another solid arm that's out there. Shamanaya as well. It sounds like he might be going back to the Mets. And then obviously the big one of the offseason, Roki Sasaki, because money's not an option there, because there's a limited amount of money that you can give him. So every team has a chance at Sasaki. It's just we haven't seen many of those players pick Atlanta, or Atlanta hasn't really been in on any of those players. But obviously getting somebody like him would be a huge difference maker as well. Walker Buehler is still available. It's starting to sound like he might get a multi-year deal out of this. And if that's the case, I don't know that the Braves would be in unless it's a multi-year deal with an opt-out after the first year. And the Braves don't really do opt-outs. So again, but Walker Buehler is out there. Andrew Heaney, Jose Quintana, they're out there as kind of depth veteran pieces. And then you got your old guys and Max Scherzer, Charlie Morton, Justin Verlander, Lance Lynn. Lance Lynn's actually somewhat interesting to me, obviously dependent on price, but those would be your veterans out there trying to hold on to one more season. Sounding like the Braves might not be as interested in bringing back Charlie Morton, and those conversations aren't really happening. But I'd be surprised if he signs with anybody else unless it's a team in Florida where it'll be close to his family. But if the Braves don't bring back, I'll say this, if the Braves don't do anything in the starting pitching realm and they don't bring back Charlie Morton on possible 1 year, $10, $12 million deal, whatever it would be, that's a little bit concerning in my mind. Again, I don't love Charlie Morton, but I certainly would take him over an Andrew Heaney or a Jose Quintana or anybody like that, especially if the price is, 10, 12 million, whatever the case may be. But there's options there, is what I'm saying. There's still plenty of options there. And then on the reliever side, you got a Tanner Scott, a Jeff Hoffman, a Carlos Estevez. Those are probably going to be your higher market guys. Then you got an AJ Minter, a Kirby Yates, Michael Soroka. So all three of those guys we're very familiar with, who have been with the Braves before. You got David Robertson as well. So there's plenty of bullpen options that are still out there. And then you got Ha-Seong Kim too, as a possible replacement at shortstop. I didn't mention any shortstops in there because there's just not a lot of shortstops options. But Ha-Seong Kim is one. We haven't really heard much of anything on him, but he could be somebody the Braves go after and as a possible replacement down the road. He's going to miss some time at the beginning of the year, but could be a replacement at some point in 2025. So again, those are just the free agent options. I went into some of the trade options of guys that we know have been rumored at the winter meetings, but there's probably even more trade options out there. There's still a lot left to be decided this offseason. So there's no reason to really panic so far. But it is unusual to see Alex not go out and already get done what he wanted to accomplish in the offseason, because he just generally works so quick, and then he waits till the end to see what's left and what kind of falls into his lap. But I do think, there is plenty. Luis Castillo is Joshman Rodriguez points out, if he were to come available, or any of those Seattle pitchers, again, I don't really know that we'd match up because they need some offense. And unless you're going to give them Jared Kelenic back. I don't know who you're trading from the major league roster, but that is, there's still a lot left to be decided this offseason is basically the point. So I get it. I'm frustrated too because I want to see the Braves do something. But when you take a step back and realize this roster is already ready to contend, it's just about filling out the depth and giving yourself the best chance by adding as much talent to the roster as you can. But certainly if things go the Braves' way and everybody stays healthy, this team is good enough to compete for a World Series. It's just coming out the season we just had where nobody stayed healthy, especially on the offensive side of things. You want to be better prepared for that, and you want to have some great depth. And, Nick Allen and these Rule 5 picks that the Braves got, they're just not it, or they're not exciting. But we'll talk about those picks. We'll also talk about the Garrett Crochet trade and all the other news and rumors coming out of the final day of the winter meetings. We'll do that all here next. You shouldn't have to stress when you're a fan in the offseason. You also shouldn't have to stress when you're worrying about buying tickets to your next big event. And you don't when you use Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices you can filter right there on the same screen where you view your seat. You know exactly what it's going to look like. It's one of the reasons I love using the Gametime app, and I use it whenever I'm going to a Braves game. They also have their Gametime picks. It shows you the best deals for whatever event you're interested in. Just click on the event you're thinking about going to, and then you can filter it for Gametime picks. It's going to show you the best value tickets for that event. Again, all in prices, shows you up front. You know exactly what you're paying before you get to the checkout screen, and you get the Gametime guarantee. That means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime and use our code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Winter meetings wrapped up on Wednesday. We'll see what falls out from the rest of these meetings. Again, a lot of discussions had this weekend. Just because the Braves didn't do something didn't mean that they didn't start something. So we'll see what else happens. 105 days till opening day. Thank you so much for that, Doc. And even sooner for me before the college baseball season. I just need it back. I've been watching replays of games from last year, not Braves games, because to be honest, there weren't a lot of Braves games that excited me last season, but I am missing some baseball and I cannot wait to get back into it. Now, there was a big trade that happened on Wednesday with the Garrett Crochet trade going to the Boston Red Sox for Kyle Teal, Braden Montgomery, Chase Medroth, and Wikelman Gonzalez. I know I completely butchered those names, and I apologize for that. Look, we knew the Braves weren't a likely fit for the White Sox. I talked about it in my offseason, my perfect offseason for the Braves, and at the top of that list was trading for Garrett Crochet. I'm a big believer in Garrett Crochet. I think he's going to be a top of the rotation arm for a long time. I think he could be another version of Chris Sale. And it's fitting because you got another pitcher going from the White Sox to the Red Sox, similar to Chris Sale's situation. So maybe the Braves will just wait until Chris Sale's at the end of his career with the Red Sox, and after a couple more years of injuries, they'll get him on the cheap for a bounce back. But as for now, Garrett Crochet is going to the Red Sox. And again, we knew the White Sox wanted position players. Braves just don't have a lot to offer in that regard. And so it was never a great match for the Braves to get somebody like Crochet. I don't know if they were in on him or not, what kind of offer package they could have possibly put together, but it wasn't meant to be. You look at Kyle Teal, for me, it's not somebody that I'm very high on, but he is regarded as one of the better catching prospects in the system. I think it's a comparable to a Drake Baldwin. I think Drake Baldwin actually has more upside offensively than does Kyle Teal. But then you look at Montgomery, that's kind of the difference maker for me. The Braves really didn't have anything to match that. Braden Montgomery, a switch hitter, really good player, got injured at the end of the season at Texas A&M, or he might have gone even higher in last year's draft. Nacho doesn't match up to that level of upside for a Braden Montgomery. So again, Braves really couldn't have matched that. Maybe with a Jose Perdomo down the line, something like that. But again, where Montgomery already is in his development, it's just the Braves weren't going to be able to match those two prospects. And you maybe could have matched with Drake Baldwin to a Kyle Teal, but there really was no comparison for of Montgomery that the Braves could have given up. And I don't know enough about the other two guys. Obviously, I just butchered both of their names, but it sounds like this was a pretty good package for the White Sox. And, again, I would have loved to have seen it happen because I like Garrett Crochet, but at least he doesn't go to the Mets. So a lot of people saying that the Braves dodged a bullet there because he didn't go to the Mets, but he does go to the Red Sox. And so Crochet is off the board. And then some other moves happening. You had the signings of Juan Soto, Max Fried at the winter meetings, along with Nathan Eovaldi. You had the trade with the Guardians and the Blue Jays, and then the Guardians and the Pirates. There's a lot of maneuvering happening on Tuesday night. And then you had the Rule 5 draft. And this is where the Braves actually did something. So hang around for this because the Braves actually made some moves at the winter meetings as they drafted 2 players in the Rule 5 draft. And that is a rarity. I mean, I didn't really even cover the Rule 5 draft because the Braves haven't taken anybody since Alex Anthopoulos took over as GM. 2017 was the last time they took a player in the Rule 5 draft, and this year they took 2. Now, just to give you a little bit of an update's not the right word, to explain you a little bit about how the Rule 5 draft works, these players are immediately added to the team's 40-man roster, and they must remain on the team's 26-man roster, or they have to be offered back to their original team for half the price. You pay $100,000 for these players, and if you end up optioning them to the minor leagues, you have to offer them back to the other team at $50,000. So again, pretty much got to stay on your roster all year long. I don't know the chances of that happening for both of these guys. Feels like it's more likely for Anderson Pilar. And again, hopefully I'm getting some of these names right today. Coming from the Marlins, right-handed pitcher, 26 years old, pitched 37 games last year, started 2 games as well. So it might be a guy that can go back and forth as a swing man or at least throw some multiple innings for you. He had a 2.64 ERA, a 1.02 whip, 71 strikeouts to just 13 walks in those innings. And that's 11.02 K per nine and a 2.02 walk per nine. You know the Braves love to get those relievers that don't walk a lot of batters. And that certainly seems to be a good thing for Pilar, who didn't walk a lot of people last year. Pitched across 3 levels. His walks did go up as he got to AAA, but so did his strikeouts. Cutter, slider, 4-seamer, sinker, fastball sits around 93. Both the cutter, 4-seamer, and the sinker all average around 93 miles per hour. Can get up into the mid-90s at times. Apparently has a good cutter, though. I was looking at some of his Baseball Savant outings, but you can do this on Baseball Savant. Some you may not know. If you go to Savant, go to the game feed, you look for a particular date during the year, click on where it says MLB, and you can change it to AAA to look at AAA stats. So I went back and looked at some of his. The first one I pulled up, he got 7 whiffs on 14 swings against that cutter. So again, that seems, and it's the pitch he throws the most by a pretty wide margin. So it's a really good cutter that he has that gets swing and miss. There's a real chance he sticks in the bullpen. So we'll see what happens going into spring training. Obviously, they'll both compete for a job. Christian Cairo is the other guy, Guardians infielder, 23 years old. He split time between AA and AAA last year, 69 games at AAA. He slashed 233, 355, big on base number, but just a 314 slug and 85 WRC plus, only 2 homers, 12 strikeouts, a 15.6% walk rate, a 22.6% strikeout rate. I think I meant to say 12 stolen bases, not strikeouts. So does have some speed, walks a lot. According to David O'Brien of The Athletic, he's a plus defender at shortstop and can play the outfield as well. So basically you're looking at a versatile defender who can get on base and has speed. So he'll be competing with Luke Williams and Nick Allen for that bench spot. Maybe you're able to keep 2 of those guys, maybe a Nick Allen and a Cairo, depending on what else happens. But it seems like it's just depth and insurance for a super utility type of guy that can play good defense at multiple spots and somebody who walks and has speed. Well, that's very valuable, especially off the bench. You get somebody that can get on base, somebody that has speed, and somebody that can play over the field. You want to have one of those guys on your bench. The Braves also took 4 minor leaguers in the minor league portion of the draft. I know I'm going to absolutely mess up these names. This should be the title of the podcast. Jake messes up a bunch of names. Blaine Abida, Yankees, Samuel Mejia from the Rays, Lisandro Espinoza from the Cardinals, and catcher Dylan Shockley from the Pirates are the 4 minor leaguers. I'm not going to act like I know much about any of those guys, but I've heard good things on Abida, Abeyta, as a possible back-end filler type of guy. So the Braves were busy on the last day of winter meetings, but not exactly making the moves that you would have thought or hoped for the Atlanta Braves. Jake Burger was also traded to the Rangers on Wednesday. Forgot to mention that, for Max Acosta Chidi Vargas. Oh man, I'm doing terrible on these names today, as well as pitching prospect Brian Mendoza. Where are the Jakes in the world? Let me get some easier names in here. According to my Marlins friends, it's another horrible move in a line of horrible moves by the Marlins. You had Jake Berger under control for, I think, 4 years. He was their only power threat, and he was affordable, under control, and they traded him for some prospects that I clearly have never heard of, as I wasn't able to pronounce any of their names. I just feel for my Marlins fans. It's a tough look over there. I don't know what they're doing, but the NL East needs a team like this. They need a team that is going to lose 100 games, because the rest of the division, the Nats are getting better. They're apparently in on Christian Walker and others, and they got some young guys coming up. It's a tough division. So to have a team like the Marlins who continually make poor moves and lose games, just gave up, a really good manager in my mind in Schumacher. NL East needs a team like that. Bregman could be the next free agent signing. Not exactly sure where he's going to go, but he might be the next one off the board. Jacob Webb, old Atlanta Brave, signed with the Rangers for just $1.25 million. He was pretty good with the Orioles, so that's a really good deal there for the Rangers. And it's sounding more and more likely like Kyle Tucker will get traded. We talked about that earlier. Mauricio Haraya says, "Hey Jake, how's it going? Do you believe that if the Braves avoid major injuries, they could win the World Series?" Thank you for asking that question, because yes, I do. And that kind of brings everything full circle, because that's how I started off the podcast. This roster is good enough if they stay healthy to win a World Series. I believe that. Hopefully you do as well. If not, hopefully the Braves make some big moves this offseason to get you to believe that. Either way, I cannot wait for this season to get started. Also can't wait for the Braves to do something, because I feel you. It has been a slow grind to this offseason as an Atlanta Braves fan, seeing all the other moves that are being made around Major League Baseball and the Braves not doing anything. So wake up, Alex Anthopoulos. Let's go make a move out there. Go trade for Kyle Tucker. Go sign Roki Sasaki, and let's get it going for 2025. Thank you all for joining me on today's podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And thank you to Miguel Fria, David Thatcher, Braves Thrills, Monty 2K, Jasmine, Docs Cards, JJ Evans, Jack Norton. Thank you all for joining me here live on today's episode. Go subscribe now, and I'll talk to you on our next podcast of Locked